Thank you for listening to this episode of Lending Thoughts, sponsored by Rocket Pro. Today, I'll be joined by Benjy Katchen. Benjy is the CEO and founder of Wahi, a digital real estate platform and real estate brokerage, which helps consumers have a better experience when searching and ultimately buying a property. Benjy does an awesome job telling us about the market and how he sees it with his market predictions. We talk about what the name Wahi even means, and we get into technology and why you shouldn't just build technology for technology's sake, but rather focus on the consumer experience. So have a listen in, and thank you again. Benjy, thanks for being on with me today. I appreciate you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
So I've had the privilege of having many conversations with you. Would love for people to get to know you a little bit more. Can you tell us your life story in 60 seconds or less, please?
60 seconds is short, Bekim, but I'm going to try. I was born and raised in Calgary, so I'm a native Albertan. However, I spent the last 30 years in Ontario. Career-wise, I've really spent the last 20 years innovating for consumers, first in banking and now in real estate. I have 2 daughters and an amazing wife. And my 3 big passions outside of work are travel. I love taking our family on very cool trips to places like Japan or Israel or France. I love playing tennis, and I'm an avid skier.
Very interesting. Where do I start? So what's a favorite place that you've ever traveled?
There are so many. That's a tough one. I love Japan and Asia. I love anywhere on the Mediterranean for the food. And I spent some time when I was much younger living in Mexico, and I definitely love Mexico for the culture.
Very interesting. And I love how simply you boil down 20-ish or so years, if I'm not mistaken, of like banking, entrepreneurship, et cetera, into the way that you did it. But I'm going to force you to go a little bit deeper. So what was banking life like? I mean, you, if I'm not mistaken, worked at multiple banks, have innovated inside of them before you went and started innovating externally. What does innovating at a bank in Canada even mean?
One of the early career opportunities I had was I worked at Amicus Bank, which went to market as President's Choice Financial. Folks would now know it as Simply Financial. And at the time, in the early 2000s, that was a fintech before anybody knew the term fintech. It was a banking business that was going up against the big guys. It had 1 million customers. It had a category killer value proposition. And everything we did, we lived and breathed, was about innovating for the customer. It was creating a in the palm of your hand digital first experience, just while the banks were getting their feet wet with digital and internet. It was creating an omni-channel experience. So helping customers bank when they want, where they want, how they want. And it was cutting out all the unnecessary bureaucracy that often governs banking relationships. So it was a very cool experience in that we got to really go and innovate against the status quo, innovate for the consumers, and create several new and distinct products and services through this. So that was very cool.
Yeah.
I took that experience, and I won't get into every detail along the way, but one of the things that I had the opportunity to do a little over 10 years ago was I joined HomeTrust. And obviously HomeTrust is pretty big in the broker community and the mortgage community. They at the time wanted to start a consumer banking business, a direct-to-consumer banking. Prior to that, the whole ethos was about brokered deposits through financial planners, through wealth advisors, et cetera, to fund mortgages that are sold through mortgage brokers. They had never done anything where they had gone direct to consumer. And I had spent my whole career building and growing direct to consumer businesses. And they offered me a platform to build that. We called it Oaken Financial. And Oaken Financial, over the ensuing 10 years, became a big part of HomeTrust funding. It became a $5 billion deposit business in its own right by the time I left to start Wahi 3 years ago.
Gotcha. So your job is essentially responsible for bringing in those direct-to-consumer deposits, which then can be lent out through the mortgage business. Is that correct?
Sure, but it's even more than that. To bring in a deposit, people don't just back a truck up to the bank and bring in their deposits. It's actually a business in its own right. So you actually have to create a category killer value proposition for those customers. They're different customers than the mortgage customers. Somebody who needs a loan is probably a bit younger in age, or they're running a business. People who tend to have deposits they bring to the bank tend to be a little older and wanting to take less risk or have a balanced portfolio versus the stock market. But you have to build a business for them. And that's really what I specialize doing, is finding that value proposition and then weaving together an amazing digital plus in-person experience involving the customer and the bank in order to create that as you could argue, almost a standalone business in its own right.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's both product and experience. It's effectively the entire go-to-market, right? Like
100%.
Who are we going after and what do they want?
Right. And it's also the service delivery model, because you have to be able to do it in an efficient digital first way. The consumer today. So even though, for instance, Oaken's customers, they tended to be above 60. There were customers that were 80, 90. We even had a couple customers that were 100. And the conventional wisdom at the time is, oh, anybody over 60, they want a branch, or they want their wealth advisor to guide them every step of the way, or they're not going to be using a mobile app. And what we found is, if you build technology not for technology's sake, but you build it in the pursuit of servicing the clients and what their needs are, we're past the tipping point. Canadians of all generations and all ages expect to be served how they want to be served. And that includes great digital and mobile experiences. And in banking, which involves trust, and very much like real estate, which is the business that I lead today, is really about trust. It's equally about that human connection as well. So it's that great service model that involves amazing tech and amazing humans in the pursuit of service excellence.
It brought me back just now to something that I think the year was roughly 2012, 13. And I remember, working on some go-to-market stuff for another product. And we were doing some research on Facebook and, users there. And I think that at the time, the average user was something like 58 years old. And there was this idea that hey, technology and, who are we going after? A bunch of teenagers. And it's like, nope. The average user was actually 58. It was actually, your mom, my mom, whatever, right? Who were the people who were using this and actually interacting with it, which is interesting. COVID was an interesting experiment for all the negative. It
100%.
Told us who was being digital at first, or at least being digitally comfortable to build around. So that's a really interesting experience. And then you said you basically take those learnings and then you take them to a separate business in Wahi. So what's sort of the founding story of Wahi, and then maybe what is Wahi exactly?
Well, why don't we start with the name Wahi? What is Wahi? Where is Wahi? I think it's a very, very cool name, but what we ultimately set out to do was to build the next generation of real estate business for how today's home buyers want to transact. And if we take a step back, we think that almost every other industry has been affected by digitization. Whether it's how you book your trips, how you apply for your mortgage, how you even look up the balance of the mortgage.
How we order our food.
Yeah, how you order your food, how you order your Airbnb, your Uber. We sort of lose track that everything we do now is in the palm of your hand. But yet we rely on this individual, all-knowing expert that has all the information when we make the biggest purchase or sale of our lives, which is our house. And we set out to say, well, how can we give two things: control back to consumers for this biggest purchase, but also amp up the level of expertise of the people giving advice with better information and tools at their fingertips to help those consumers. So we set out to create Canada's next great property tech platform, which is Wahi. And we come back to, well, why Wahi? What is Wahi? And what we wanted was a name that really was a unique digital name, but was based on something about the house. The house is the place where, people grow their families. It's the place where Canadians really value more than anything. And Wahi means place in Hawaiian. And we had a moment when we heard this name for the first time and we said, yeah, we're going to call it Wahi. So it's a bit unique and different, but also it's all about the house. It's all about the sense of place.
Yeah, I'm a curious individual, so I Googled it right when I heard about you guys. I'm like, what the heck is a Wahi? Initially, I thought it was maybe an acronym for something, right? And I'm like sitting there, mapping it back through my brain, trying to figure out what the W could be and the A, and I couldn't get there. I'm like, I have to Google this. And then I I realized what it was, and I go, oh, that makes total sense. So
yeah, 100%. And then we learned later, after we named it, people started coming up to us and said, oh, it means revelation in Arabic. I'm like, okay, well, it could be revelation, or there's all these other meanings ascribed to it. But really, it's about the sense of place, which is what we're creating.
yeah, I love that. So what are you creating? What are you learning now? I mean, obviously you go to market, you have an initial hypothesis for how you could serve consumers and what consumers are looking for. Are there any of your original assumptions that did not prove to be true? And, to the flip side of that, are there some things that you did not give much thought through that are now like ridiculously clear after 3 years, 4 years of, consumer data? Because I guess one of the advantages of being a digital platform is, as opposed to the individual realtor who's out on the street that may not have all the data to back them up, like you guys can create data and create fresh data really through consumer behavior through the app. So what's that telling you?
Sure. One of our original hypotheses was that we had to build the best app to be in the palm of the hands of the consumer. And we started building the company saying, we're going to build that best app. And we had some ideas of what the best app was. Where we were a little fuzzier in our thinking was exactly what is the value proposition that is going to make consumers say, hey, rather than transacting with my best friend's sister's cousin, who's a realtor, which is typically the way Canadians find their realtor today, what's going to make them say, maybe like that realtor, she's okay, but maybe I would be better served if I used a realtor associated with Wahi in some way, because they could do something for me. And at the beginning, we thought that something might be better insight, better control over the experience, better digital tools. But what really got the business to take off is when we launched Cashback. It was putting a bit more money in people's pockets for buyers. And what we quickly figured out was that the technology that we built wasn't just better for the consumer being more informed, more in control, being able to book things online so they could keep track, doing multi-directional chats. So they had all their chats and their listings and all their journeys and everything organized. But that actually it was making the realtors better realtors. And we had a number of realtors that are part of Wahi, part of the brokerage, that are Wahi realtors. And we have a national marketplace of realtors as well. We have about 250 or so realtors across the country, and many of them are using the tool, and we're finding that it's actually making them better realtors. They're able to find customers at the house faster. They're able to move their leads through the funnel at a rate that they've never seen before, and they're able to close a greater percentage of those leads. And what we learned through this process was that by making these realtors better realtors, they're not just 2 or 3 times more efficient than a traditional realtor, but they're 10x more efficient. And in being 10x more efficient, we could afford to give customers some cash back, and we would all win. The customer would win, the realtor would win, and we would win in the process. And I really believe in win-win situations where you're not doing something at the expense of the consumer or the realtor, but you're doing something where you grow the pie for everybody. And that's really what we learned through this process.
It's interesting because, I think most would tell you like, hey, I want better service, but I'm not willing to, give up a whole bunch of value and money as part of the transaction to get it. So consumers are thinking, okay, not only do I want cash back, that's fantastic. I still want the same great service, if not better service in doing that. So you got to like go out and actually deliver a superior experience than they would have gotten from, I think it was, you said like, sister's cousin's cousin or something like that,
Sure.
Right? Like that third connection. So
100%. And that's one of the things I learned in digital banking was, there was this conventional wisdom at the time, 20 years ago, that customers needed the branch, and that maybe if they used the internet channel or an app, it would be at the expense of the branch or something like that. Actually, customers want everything to work, and they don't want to really think about how it works. They just want it to be better. And by creating better digital tools, we were able to have customers say, okay, that builds trust because it just works. It builds trust with the customer, which then allows you to innovate value propositions on top of that create the value, which convinces them to actually give you a try in the first place. And we found that same thinking is true here in real estate, that you have to actually have not just the better tools. That's great, but that's table stakes. One of the things about real estate, though, is unlike many industries, and you'll obviously find this as well in the mortgage space, is it's a very infrequent transaction. Your mortgage might be every 3 to 5 years as you renew it, But actually buying or selling a home is something people only do 4, 5, 6 times in their life. It's an average of every 7 years in Canada. And oftentimes, as we've been targeting first-time home buyers for the first couple of years, you don't know what you don't know. So you're going into this thinking, okay, well, this is how everybody does it. So you actually have to do something radically better to have consumers question conventional wisdom and say, okay, I'm actually going to try this. And for us, it's great that they try the app and they use it, but it costs a lot of money to put all of the technological capabilities and all the data acquisition into this app. So we also need to be able to monetize that in a way. And that's where the value proposition comes in and is equally important to this.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said in that the transaction is so infrequent that people might not even remember how much the last one sucked, right?
Right.
They might have done their last housing transaction 10 years ago when they bought their previous home. It might have been terrible. I've experienced that too, even on the mortgage side where we're over here, we know what a great mortgage experience looks like. And we'll look back and we'll remember a client or something like that. Like, ooh, that last one was really rough. We ended up closing on the mortgage, but it was ugly right up until the last second. And we're like, that client's never going to work with us again. They'll come back to us 3 to 5 years later and they'd be like, hey, so excited to work with you guys again. It's time to take a look at that renewal. We're like, whoa, didn't you remember how bad it was? They don't sometimes.
Right, and they have no baseline to compare it to. So they don't know if it would have even worse somewhere else.
And consequently, when it's great, they don't. Right. They're like, that was good.
Yeah, they just take it for granted. Okay, I got my mortgage. I now owe you money for the next 25 years. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for the bill. Yeah. So, trying to create that consistency across the experience, it sounds like what you guys are doing is trying to marry that, what we would call an old fashioned handheld approach through a real estate agent, which clients still love, but enhancing that human being experience with technology rather than a full technology replacement for the human experience. Am I understanding that correctly? And that
that's exactly right, Bekim.
Yeah.
I don't believe that customers are ever, or maybe it's just a very rare customer that would do this, but the general mainstream customer is ever going to want or expect a one-click Amazon experience, like buy my house now and just send me the bill $1 million and the mortgage is going to be signed up. I think customers want to take control of the situation, but buying a house is a very, very involved experience. It involves often a lot of human emotion. We believe that we should add some data and consistency to add a little bit of rationality to that as well, so that we can balance both that emotional aspect of buying where you're really going to live, where you're going to raise your family, where you're going to sleep, where you're going to, maybe work, with ensuring that it's done in a sane, rational way, that it's purchased at a price that's fair for both the buyer and the seller. It's done for buyers with eyes wide open, so they're not risking their family's future by not putting the appropriate conditions on an offer, and making sure that they do an inspection so they go in eyes wide open, knowing what they're getting into, et cetera. There's a lot of things here that are a little bit complex and intricate. And it's one thing to go buy that book or cord to charge your laptop with one click on Amazon. But I think the house, just like the mortgage, is a much more intricate experience that should be put onto steroids, for lack of a better word, with better user experience, better app design, better data, better information, and ultimately better advice using all of that.
I think you said it. It's just such a big transaction. It evokes so much fear from people. In the data that we've gathered and the surveys that we've run, clients actually aren't as concerned with the how. They care more about the what. And what I mean by that is when they're thinking about the mortgage transaction, the real estate transaction as a whole, and we start selling all of our value propositions that we're deeply proud of over here, we built this, we built that, we built it. Clients are like, yeah, I don't really care. I just want the most certainty that I can get through this very stressful period of my life. Sure. So I need to know that this mortgage is clear to close and that the real estate transaction is going to go through as planned without an entire mess. So whatever you need to do, Benjy and Bekim and the team, to figure that out is whatever you need to make happen. I don't want a whole bunch of bumps in the road. I don't want to be within 24 hours of my signing date wondering, is this going to happen? Is this not going to happen? I just want to know, as soon as I give you what you tell me you need, you check the boxes. I get a whole bunch of green boxes saying that we're good to go and that it actually gets delivered on, period. And we always come back to this word, which is certainty. Clients want certainty.
100%.
Yeah.
Sure, they would notice if for whatever reason there wasn't certainty. It's the same thing with technology. In my career, I found many firms pursue technology for technology's sake. But technology exists as a means to an end. So in your case, it could be about certainty. And in some cases, technology is the best way to get there. In other cases, it's human process is the best way to get there. And I think it's important to not lose sight on what is the end goal, which in your case is certainty.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's interesting is, you've talked about yourself being a platform, but you've also talked about yourself being a real estate brokerage network in a way. Who are the types of real estate agents that Wahi would work with as a part of its network to make sure that it's delivering that type of client experience that you guys are after?
That's actually a really interesting question, Bekim. We've done a lot of work to determine what makes a great realtor. And certainly there's certain aspects just about the charisma, being a good listener and empathetic and really understanding customers' needs and putting those into action. But there's also some foundational skills that we've correlated, and we've done a lot of data science and analysis around this, analyzing many, many listings, for example. And there's some skills about putting together, it may sound like it's bread and butter, but it's putting together a great listing, ensuring that there's great photos that market the property and that they're done with a proper resolution so that they show the best, having a sense to ensure that the place shows well through whether it's a bit of repair or staging, etc. It's not necessarily do complex analytics themselves, but to understand the analytics as presented. One of the products that we've built, I believe, is Canada's best digital current market assessment. It's not publicly available on the site, but it's a tool that we enable all our realtors to use, where we can essentially structure all the information to help have a very, very data-driven pricing conversation with customers. It's the ability to take that and look at what we come up with and really add their own 2 cents to it. Are we looking at the right comparable properties to the subject property? Are the puts and takes on valuation accurate? We have a view using our machine learning that plus den on the 2-bedroom condo adds an extra $30,000 of value to the unit versus the other subject property that doesn't have it, or the parking spot's worth X dollars. We have a point of view on that, but they have to be able to take that and understand the data enough and understand the market enough to be able to turn that into empathetic advice for the customers. And it's a lot of things that we ask to be a great realtor, but that's really what the full package entails. And we've been pretty successful at recruiting a number of those realtors inside our brokerage. We have a number of them that are also independent contractors that do some of the tours and things for us, plus have their own listings with Wahi. And then there's this network of marketplace realtors. There's about 250 of them we co-advise with, and we're really looking for those characteristics. And that's what they all bring together, is that combination of characteristics about great empathy as demonstrated through various reviews, as well as the ability to structure the advice, prepare good listings through analyzing their listings, etc.
Yeah, so you guys are putting a lot of energy then into making sure that you have the right real estate agents inside of that network.
100%. Yeah, this isn't just, John said this person is good. We're actually going and really doing our own due diligence and using our own tools to evaluate.
Yeah, it also means it's not growth at any cost. It's client experience at any cost.
100%. Yeah, we're very client experience driven is what I would say.
Yeah. With that said, kind of going back to something we were talking about earlier, but is there anything that has surprised you over the last couple of years that maybe today? And I'm sure there's a lot that today that you didn't know, before you started Wahi, but is there anything that truly was surprising that maybe you were just fully off on before you got going, that now you look back and you're like, wow, I wish I knew that?
I think the biggest surprise to me, which with 2020 hindsight should have been obvious, but it's just how long it often takes for a customer or a couple to find their dream home. I come from industries where when somebody calls you or sends an email saying, hey, I want to, maybe come in to talk to you about this, take the banking industry, I want to maybe open up a GIC or something. From first click to transaction could be a matter of minutes in the shortest case, or at the most, it's a week. It's like maybe they want to come in and chat, but it's a week. What has been one of the sort of strangest things for me to adapt to as I come into this real estate industry is It could be a 2 or 3 year experience for somebody buying a house. In the fourth quarter of 2024, for example, we were finding houses from customers that we had found at the beginning of 2023. And we'd been working with them, talking to them, waiting for the right house to become available for sale, ensuring they go on a tour, maybe losing an offer or two because some of the conditions weren't met in terms of inspection, or they weren't able to get it quite at the price that they could afford. And it's a very long journey to get to that. So I think that would be the biggest thing. The other thing that's surprising for me coming from banking is the transactional nature of this business. In your business in mortgages, it's transactional in that you get the mortgage, but the mortgage is with you for the duration. And then presumably everybody at Rocket wants to get the renewal or refinance. And when you get a customer, it could potentially be a 25, 30-year relationship. In our business, could be 2 years to get to a transaction. And then even after the transaction, we're not old enough that we figured this out yet. I don't know how it's going to play out. I want to make sure that we set the stage to play out. But we want to engage those customers for many more years. So 7 years later, when they're willing to upsize or downsize or life events happen to them, that we're one of the first people they consider, if not the place they consider to be their real estate agent. So that, I think, are the two things that were maybe obvious with 2020 hindsight, but took a little bit of getting used to as I migrated to this industry.
Yeah, I love the concept of the 3 R's, which is something we talk a lot about on our team, which the 3 R's stand for review, refer, return. So if you're looking for guiding metrics, you probably could or should start there. Again, we're a little further along in the journey, but
sure,
5 years right now. And then that's some of the things that we're looking at is like those 3 R's is like, can we make those three things happen? Those are high indicators in our experience of a really quality experience and delivery on the first transaction. Because like you said, I mean, if you are going out and you are acquiring clients net new with every single transaction over the next 15, 20, 25 years, you're going to have a tough time making it. You really want to create repeats, referrals, all those things, right?
100%.
So we're thinking about that the same way. I'm going to ask you a market question. I don't want you to feel like you need to be Nostradamus, because who the heck knows what's going to happen in 2025? There's so many macro factors that drive real estate, and the hardest one to measure is usually just sentiment. So what are you seeing right now in terms of user behavior on the application as well as with your real estate agents in the buying market right now? Are we in a good real estate year in 2025, or do we still, need to contend with some headwinds here?
So if you were to ask me prior to Trump's tariff announcement, I would say we're looking for a much stronger 2025 than 2024 or even 2023. I think 2024 was a very difficult year, and it followed another difficult year in 2023 as the market normalized post-COVID. I would say the activity levels we've seen over the last 6 to 8 weeks have been very positive for the year. Typically, the winter months aren't big transaction months in real estate, but they're months where serious buyers and sellers get prepared. They get prepared to list in March or April or May. They get their ducks in a row, so to speak, to ensure they have financing lined up. They start getting educated on the market in the wintertime so that they can jump when housing inventory grows. And we're absolutely seeing those trends right now. So far, they haven't slowed down. The big $1 million question that we all ask is what happens to interest rates and what happens with Trump tariffs? And I think that those two questions are related. And I guess only time will tell what actually happens.
Yeah. So when we think about the interconnectedness of those two things, is it to say that if the tariffs happen, it is likely to potentially pause rates or force us to go back up in rates to protect the Canadian dollar against the US dollar? Like, is that the conclusion? Sorry, I'm going to pull you back to your bank days to ask you to play economist here. But,
the US Federal Reserve has two jobs, which is full employment and price stability, i.e. lack of inflation. Canadian Central Bank, their mandate is only one job, and that's price stability, so lack of inflation. So if the tariffs prove to be inflationary on one hand, then that would imply higher interest rates. The flip side, though, is even if they're inflationary today, if they lead to unemployment, that's disinflationary. So I don't know where it will all play out. I'm not an economist and I haven't gamed it all the way through, but we shall see.
I mean, it should be very interesting just given the fact that there are so many factors playing against one another. And interest rates, basically, like you said, from a stability standpoint, for at least, the last couple of decades have been proven to be a good driver, if you will, or a good control mechanism for keeping things a bit stable. But we're entering new territory. So I appreciate
Yes.
you.
We haven't seen this territory with tariffs since the Smoot-Hawley Act in 1929 or 1930. So what's the expression that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes? And I think we're in for one of those situations right now where it might rhyme a little bit. So we shall see.
So if I'm a consumer, how do I treat that information to make the best real estate decision as I look forward? I've been floating around the market here for a couple of years. I want to buy a home. I don't know if it's the right time, but I've been waiting since 2017, 18, 19, 20. Here we go. Like, is this going to be the right time? It seems like it's never the right time, but in hindsight, it was always the right time. Like, what do I do with that information and how do I use it to my advantage to make a real estate decision?
Sure. I don't think that if you have 5 economists in the room, you're going to have 5 opinions as to what's going to happen in the next 5 years and what the right time is. So you almost have to discount that information. I'm not saying bury your head in the sand, but I think you have to focus on a couple of things. What's your own individual situation to make sure that you can afford what you're buying? You're buying something in your price range and that you personally can survive a little bit of a shock. It might sound like motherhood and apple pie, but you should have an emergency fund that can get you by if you, for some reason, lose your job and you've got to spend a little bit of time looking for a job, or there's a personal situation that happens. But as long as you buy something that's within your affordability, there's never the perfect time. But as you said, in hindsight, if you're going to own that house for 10 years and you're a first-time buyer, I'm sure you're going to look back at 10 years and say, okay, you know what? That was the right thing to do. Whether prices go up, whether they stay flat, at the very least, it's a forced saving mechanism. It's a place that you can call home, raise your family, do your work, live life. And I'm not one of those people that says buy now or you're going to eat cat food when you're old age or something like that. I'm not one of those people that says just buy. But at the same time, I do believe that you have to live your life, and you may want to wait till there's a little bit more macroeconomic clarity. But then even when there's macroeconomic clarity, you can't predict that. Like, who would have predicted COVID? You could be in the most stable time, but then COVID happened. So life is unpredictable. Right. Get your own house in order, so to speak. Make sure you can afford what you're buying and go live your life, including if homeownership is in your dreams.
Get your own house in order may be a brand slogan I just haven't given enough thought to, by the way. So I'm going to pull that one away. That's great advice. I mean, the question that I've always tried to, think through, and when I'm talking to friends and family, it's, hey, I can't tell you what's going to happen over the next 12, 24, 36 months, but I can make an accurate prediction. Probably, like you said, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it rhymes. Real estate is likely to raise in value over the next 30 years.
I think that's a pretty accurate prediction. And it's the same with the stock market, right? Like, people ask you, oh, what stock should I pick? Should I buy Tesla? Should I buy this? I'm like, I would never give anybody that advice. I'd say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And it's time in the market, not timing the market. I don't know if you've heard that one before, but if you've got time in the market, then that's likely going to sort itself out over a long period of time.
Right. Because if the stock market and the real estate market go down over the next 30 years, we're all in serious trouble.
Sure.
So that long-term advice is the view that I recommend as well. So I much appreciate that. I'm curious. I mean, you've done some amazing things, Benjy. For anyone who has not used the Wahi app and experienced what the Wahi app brings to the market, I highly recommend it. I'm a user myself. I'm always poking around on there. And,
very cool. Thank you.
And we appreciate the partnership. So as you think forward now, I mean, you guys are, building, growing, developing your consumer experience, developing a lot of new learning. And you said yourself, in some ways, like, you're learning and developing as an individual as well and figuring out how to drive that. So how do you envision the rest of your career, that, the experience with Wahi and ultimately the legacy and impact that you want to create as you look forward?
Well, that's quite the question. I can't say that this is my last act, so I'm not quite on the legacy question yet. What I would say is one of the things I'm proud of is growing some amazing teams. And I've had the honor to work with several really, really talented individuals over time. And what I'm most proud of at Wahi in my current situation is that we've built a stable of extremely talented leaders, and that allows several things to happen. One, it's a team to create this. It's not just me. Number one. Number two, we get the best ideas from having the diverse perspectives. And three, I'm not a micromanager. So, I can go take my daughter skiing for a few days. And, there's several people here that can continue driving the day-to-day operations, the customer experience, the innovation that allows me not to take a step back, because I really am, and I believe that I in founder's mode, for lack of a better word, but founder's mode without micromanaging, at the pursuit of excellence for the customers and the realtors and for innovation. And those are some of the things that I'm really particularly proud of, and I really love spending my time doing.
I love to hear that. And I've been through that. I know what it's like to, build from zero.
Sure.
And be in the spot where you're doing every single thing and then develop systems and processes and human beings around you.
100%. Yeah.
Take a step back and see it, and it goes, oh, it's working.
I know. It's like giving birth to another baby, really.
Yeah. They're like standing on their own, and you see them like walking, and like, oh, they're walking on their own now. I don't have to hold them anymore. And, they're off to school. It is an amazing experience. I mean, a company is like a living, breathing thing, and watching it grow and then seeing yourself develop through that and having the ability to, step back and be proud of it. That's impact in itself. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective, and the fact that you've been able to build that and continue to build that is an awesome inspiration for us all. So Benjy, thank you much for being on here with me. Also, thank you for the partnership. And again, if you have not checked out Wahi, please go check out the app. It is incredible, and it is among the best in the market that I have seen. And this is coming from an American who's seen the other side, come to Canada, seen this side. You guys are just doing some awesome stuff. So keep it up.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Bekim, and thanks for having me.